guys, and welcome back. Today I'm actually going to be working on a Copic marker illustration. Even though it doesn't look like it right now, I have been doing a lot of sketching digitally lately, even for my traditional pieces, so I wanted to show you part of that process. I forgot to start recording when I first started sketching. I seem to always forget because in my mind, since it's separated from the final, I never think about it, but I wanted to make sure and show you at least a little bit of how I go about when I am sketching in the computer for a traditional one. Sometimes what I'll do is I will sketch out basically a thumbnail traditionally, and then I'll scan it in, and then I'll rework it till I get it to a place that I am much happier with. But for this one, it seems to be the case often, but this one I feel like I like the expression in her face a lot more than the final ends up being. And that's okay. I think that it's something that I can be more aware of next time. I can try to study the very subtle changes that accidentally got made to her face as I was working on it so that I can keep it more true to the emotion and the expression that I wanted originally. For this one, I liked that I was pushing it a little bit closer to maybe a sad downturned shape for her eyes, and I liked that more rounded top of it. And basically I just liked that they looked a little bit heavy and tired. And I liked the particular shape of her eyebrows. And yeah, as I ink it, it got a little bit farther away from the original sketch. But yeah, that's okay. It's a process of getting used to figuring out how things transition from a sketch into a final version. And there is always a certain amount of detail and fluidness that can get lost between the two. And I am always one for studying what parts are getting lost and why and how. That way I can try to get back into making sure that they do show up. And right here I am inking this piece, and today I'm using a brush pen and a 01 micron pen. And whenever I use brush pens, I prefer to also incorporate a micron pen because I am not very confident when it comes to making brush strokes with a brush pen and getting it really fluid and clean the way that I want it to be. So I use that micron pen to clean up edges and to do fine detailing. Usually I end up doing the face with a micron pen like this piece right here. And then for the more swooping long lines, I can use the brush pen. That way, those I can get a lot more gracefully, and it is a lot quicker than trying to build up the thickness of the line with a micron pen when it's much longer like that. I think that actually might be my focus when it comes to doing Inktober again, is focusing on getting used to brush pens and getting better at that, because when I do use a brush pen, it is just so much faster of a process. But I am working on Bristol board today, so it's a very, very smooth paper, and I have to say that this is very much an improvement from working on watercolor paper, because watercolor paper takes so much more like hand strength to get the ink into each of those little cracks, so it really is a lot more time consuming, and it makes my hands so sore after finishing it. So it's always really nice to just work on something very smooth for a change. And starting off this piece, I was actually incredibly nervous to start coloring it because my skills with markers are so rusty. I think it's been at least 2 years since I've really used them. That was when I dove into watercolors, and I love them because they did solve a lot of the issues that I had with Copic markers, well, all markers in general really, but once I really got excited about watercolors, that replaced Copic markers in my lineup of what tools I used when I was working traditionally. So I was, again, nervous because, for one thing, when I did use Copic markers, I didn't feel very confident with my process and how I did it anyways. And after having years of not doing it, I knew that I was going to make a few mistakes, and most of my skin colors are completely dry, like totally done for, all of my E range colors. So I was left with unnatural colors, and that actually was really nice. I liked that it gave me a push to try doing a color palette entirely based on something that is a lot more relative to the colors around it. So it actually turned into kind of a happy accident in the end, because I chose this purple color for her skin that was a little bit more desaturated, because I liked that. I liked that it did have not an oversaturated quality to it, particularly since I wanted it to be skin, but in some sense I wanted it to be a little bit realistic. So I chose a desaturated purple color, and by the time I'm finished coloring with this, I have lots of other very saturated cool tones that are surrounding her face, and once I add all those around it, it actually neutralizes her face a lot more, so it looks almost like it is a natural skin color and there's just an environmental color that's affecting the way that her skin looks. So like if there's a certain lighting. And I actually really loved how that turned out, and I do love how the palette ended up altogether. I actually dove into this one without doing any color comps or figuring that out at all, which I pretty much always tell myself never do that because that's usually where it goes completely derailed. But somehow this one worked out. It did help that I made sure that I used the same markers throughout each area of this piece. And that is something that if you struggle with making sure that your marker or really any traditional pieces have a cohesion to them when it comes to the colors, is to use one consistent color mixed into all of the areas or mixed into all the paints or whatever the case may be, and that immediately connects them. They have that similar look to it, and it does actually really help keeping it from looking very disorganized. And I think that absolutely helped with this piece, with the fact that I was going just picking colors as I went, because I did have I think it was like a blue and a purple that I continued through all of the sections, and that it helped it a lot. Speaking of colors that are mixed in, I actually had so much fun blending and mixing the colors with this piece. I think that when I used to use Copic markers, I did not have the skills that I do now, thanks to watercolor. I feel like watercolor has really pushed me to layer lots of different colors on top of them. And when I came back for this piece, I could feel that I understood the way to blend these and to add color on top of it a lot more than I did before. I felt very limited when I used Copic markers before, and to a certain degree I still do with this piece at least, but in a lot of ways I feel a lot more excited about mixing colors and blending them together in a way similar to this one. Actually, I didn't do a lot of gradients with the old ones, and I tended to be very tonal when it came to shading, and that's when you use basically the same color to shade as the local color it is. So basically if it's like a blue object, like this is her blue fabric, and I used only blue to shade it and a lighter blue to have a highlight. But I think that I've gotten better at realizing that I can incorporate multiple colors. And I had a lot of fun creating a slight transparency with her cloth, where I had that one base color for each section of clothing or her hair, and then I just had these little soft strokes that went through the thing that was overlapped on top of it. So it hinted at that you could almost see through it, and you could see the light and see that color coming through, and a little bit of like a reflected light. And that's one thing that I would maybe like to get better at I would definitely like to get better at if I do more Copic markers, is figuring out how to represent light a little bit better, getting better at preserving highlights and showing that there is areas that are lighter. I think I tend to go in, and this is a problem I had with watercolors originally, where I'll go in with almost a mid-tone and it's a little bit too dark for the highlights, and that is definitely something I struggle with Copic markers, is preserving those highlights. And this section that I'm working on is my biggest criticism for this piece. As usual, it's the area that I did not have very well planned out. I did these leaf things, and it was way too different. The leaves were not cohesive in their style or their design, and I did not think about their placement very well. So I was very irritated at myself for doing that. So I decided I wanted to take an opaque paint, this opaque gold, and just paint on top of it and fix up the design of those, connect them a little bit. And overall, I don't hate it, but it certainly was not a design that if I had thought that this was going to look like this in the beginning, I would have fixed it and I would have thought through this area a lot better. This is the weakest point of this piece, but yeah, that's just a reminder of how I do work and how I need to not let myself ad-lib things, because those leaves were not in the sketch. I added them when I was inking them, and that is always when it's like, why did I do that? I know that it wasn't going to turn out well because I've done that many times in the past, but I don't hate it. I actually really don't. I think that it's an element that is unusual to what I've done. I mean, I do a lot of gold and metallic, and I love that look, but as far as the design itself, it is different, I think, and I liked that it was different, and it was something that I had to kind of figure out a solution for rather than right off the bat knowing what it was going to be. So there are always merits to every problem in art. There's always something you can learn from it or something that it made you adapt to. So I don't look at this one with frustration or anything. It's just a reminder and a thing that I learned from. And that is it for today's Copic marker illustration. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed working in this, honestly. Last time I was using them, I felt like I had grown out of them and they were not fun anymore. But this was really fun and I really loved it, which is bad because it makes me want to buy all the new markers, which is expensive. But I am actually curious as far as what mediums do you guys prefer seeing me work in. I love working in watercolor, digital, and apparently Copic marker again, but I am curious as far as what videos do you guys prefer. I will always do all of them and I'll always experiment with them and do sketching videos and lots of stuff. But yeah, if you guys have a favorite, I'd love to know that. Anyways, as usual, I do have the original available at my shop. So if you'd like to own this, you can. And it looks really bad here because she's backlit, but actually I'm really happy with this and the way it turned out. So if you'd like to own her, I have a link in the description as well as in the end card, and that'll take you to my art shop. And I have lots of prints and buttons and art goodies there, and every single purchase there is a huge support to me. So thank you again if you do happen to go visit it and check it out. But yeah, I post every Wednesdays and Saturdays, so I will see you guys at my next video.